I promise you, I will not let you down.
The trucks parked outside illegally should move.
Canada's Conservatives will meet our Paris climate commitment.
Enough with the woke. Sorry, Mr. Speaker, I take that back.
To champion our conservative principles.
We are the party of law and order.
To call in the auditors. We haven't yet decided whether we're going to call for the government to impose a mandatory test or vaccination.
And we will win the next election. Canada must not ignore the reality of climate change.
Why weren't Canadians vaccinated in January and February like everyone else?
Welcome, everybody, to Controlled Opposition, Episode 10. I'm your host, Greg Wycliffe. We have a lot to talk about tonight. Of course, we're going to talk about Pierre Poilievre standing up to Big Pharma. We're going to talk about the election interference from communist China, from the Chinese regime, not the Beijing regime, but China. And, of course, we're going to talk about how the fact that allegedly some of this money, some of this election interference is going towards the Conservatives as well, Conservative MPs. And there's actually a provincial Progressive Conservative MP under the Doug Ford government that allegedly is part of this interference. And as you can imagine, no conservative politician, no conservative supporter, no conservative news outlet like Rebel News or True North wants to address this issue. And of course, I'm not saying here that China is the only enemy out there that is subverting politics in Canada, that is influencing politics in Canada. It's kind of a gangbang here in Canada, okay? There's many foreign influences trying to meddle with our elections and trying to meddle with our politics, and China just happens to be one of them. But I think, of course, it is a perfect topic to cover on Controlled Opposition because it's the idea that maybe it is a uniparty. Maybe it is just two wings of the same bird. Maybe it is just, what evidence do you need? How about Chinese communist money going to both parties? Would you be convinced then? Would that make sense to you then? Maybe it would. But let's start off, of course, with Pierre Poilievre. And, when I first saw this tweet, I thought I was dreaming. I thought, oh my God, is Pierre Poilievre standing up to Big Pharma? Is he going to say things about what has happened over the past 3 years? Well, of course not. Of course, that can't be the case with Pierre Poilievre. This is a tweet from him. A Pierre Poilievre government will sue Big Pharma companies that caused the opioid nightmare and use the funds recovered for treatment and recovery that saves lives. Now, I can agree the opioid crisis is absolutely a mess, but as my co-host has said in the past, Jeremy McKenzie, you're kind of just talking about one of the symptoms or consequences of your brain tumor, that being your headache, when the brain tumor is really what we've been through over the past 3 years, which is lockdowns, death and despair, and being coerced to take an injection that, as far as you can tell, doesn't really work that well. That was something that was also perpetrated by Big Pharma and also the government, which you are a part of, Pierre Poilievre, which you had nothing to do with resisting. So, yeah, but let's listen to this clip because this is really important, guys. The cowardice of this Conservative Party, it's not just cowardice, it's just kind of consistent dishonesty and it's misdirection. This Conservative Party is constantly doing a sleight of hand to deceive people into thinking that we're standing up for you. And this clip is a great example because if you look at the tweet, it looks and sounds great. A Poilievre government will make Big Pharma pay for the suffering and misery they have caused. That sounds great. Yeah, you're talking about the vaccines, right? You're talking about COVID and what we went over the past. I'm sure that's what you're talking about, right? No, he's talking about just opioids. But as you can see in his clip, it sounds like it makes sense.
I will launch a massive series of lawsuits amounting to over $40 billion in claims.
And don't get me wrong, it sounds great, sounds awesome, sounds great. But again, well, not only is he not standing up to the vaccines and everything, but Maxime Bernier tweeted earlier today, when it comes to this opioid crisis, it's actually the fentanyl. It's the fentanyl that is really the worst part. If you look into the studies, this is what Maxime Bernier said. Pierre Poilievre suing Big Pharma over the opioid crisis is a joke. Why? Because everyone knows fentanyl is the main driver of overdoses and deaths in Canada, and fentanyl comes from China, not Beijing, Pierre, China. And the sources are actually from Maclean's and Health Canada here, saying when it comes to of all accidental apparent opioid toxicity deaths so far in 2022, 76 involved fentanyl, 79% involved opioids that were only non-pharmaceutical, as in not from Big Pharma. And of course, people have made the argument, no, well, you get hooked because Big Pharma gives you the regular opiates like oxycodone or what have you. And that is a fair argument. And I don't think that it's like, a terrible thing that he's suing Big Pharma in this way, but obviously it's just misdirection from the much bigger problems, the much bigger damage that is being caused in this country. And I think it's very interesting too, that if you look at the source of fentanyl, which is again, majority killing Canadians with overdoses, based on information obtained through investigations and CBSA seizures, police say most of the fentanyl that ends up in North America street drugs comes from Chinese laboratories, not Beijing, Chinese laboratories. But again, this Conservative Party is really claiming and saying that, hey, we are going to fight for you. We are doing everything we can to stop Big Pharma. And it's really sad to see because, I just think of, people like Sean Hartman. This is some of you may have seen this face before. I don't have to fill in the blanks to you of what happened to Sean, but essentially he did what the government told him to do, and he's no longer with us. And he listened to the Trudeau government, and in effect, he also listened to Pierre, because Pierre didn't really say anything different. He was saying, get the vaccines, as you saw in the intro. Why aren't Canadians getting vaccinated like everybody else? This is Pierre Poilievre's government. Okay. And I think I would be remiss. I'd be remiss not to talk about this subject because without actually talking about the beginning of the pandemic. Do we remember what the beginning of the pandemic was like right before the pandemic happened? There was all this talk of a virus coming from China, coming from Wuhan. Is it the Wuhan flu? Is it the Chinese flu? Don't you dare say that, racist. Don't call it the Chinese flu. Don't call it the Wuhan flu. It's called COVID-19, guys. Don't associate this thing destroying our lives with China. By the way, speaking of cultural appropriation, we are all going to wear masks just like they do in China. And again, what are we seeing here with this Chinese regime, Chinese communist election interference? Don't call it Chinese interference. No. Call it Beijing. Call it Beijing election interference. And I won't go over all the examples, but it's creepy. Is it not creepy? Guys, have you seen how creepy this is? Everywhere you go, every single Conservative MP, and even the outlets, even the conservative outlets sometimes are saying, yeah, Beijing interference. And I get it, the Beijing is housed in Beijing, China, but still, it's language is important. Language is very important, because if we wouldn't have, listened to them and actually called it the Chinese virus and not COVID-19, then we would be in a very different spot, I think, in terms of what we associated this virus with. But thankfully, it was a virus that was made in China, and it wasn't really that good. So, but yeah, and I'll just bring this up as another example as well. Like, this is a Western student, Mega Thakur, a former Soggy Maitland Hall Don and TikTok influencer, passed away November 24th. She was 21 years old. Any guesses? Any guesses why she's no longer with us? I'm sure you can imagine why. But, Pierre Poilievre is standing up to Big Pharma. Not because of the vaccines. Not because of, not because of the misery that the country has been over for the past 3 years. No, it's just the opioids. Nothing to do with fentanyl either. Let's not bring China into this whole mess, right? Wouldn't want to do that. But and you know, Pierre does say, let me see if I can find it here.
$40 billion in claims. We will join British Columbia's lawsuit in order to recover the federal health cost.
So there's an existing lawsuit against big pharma companies already happening in BC. And again, you might say, like, when it comes to the actual lawsuit, you know, you actually have a smoking gun. You have a smoking gun when it comes to vaccines. Like, these are only a couple examples. But you know, if Pierre truly was for the people and truly did want to oppose big pharma and the vaccines and the misery that we went through and actually represented the convoy, for example, he would be part of this, the National Citizens Inquiry, which actually just kicked off this morning. For those who don't know, this is similar to the inquiry over the use of the Emergencies Act, except it's run by citizens. And it is very exciting. It's going to be across the country at various different locations. I highly suggest you check it out. Inquiry_Canada on Twitter. And you can go to nationalcitizensinquiry.ca. But to give you an idea, this is just this was in Nova Scotia, the Truro part of the inquiry is going on right now. There's Dr. Peter McCullough, a renowned cardiologist. If you've been following COVID science, the real COVID science, you've probably heard of this guy. But, you know, there is an existing inquiry that actually is kind of challenging big pharma, or that's not their main focus, but it's to focus on the government of Canada and how they responded to this, to COVID-19. And I guess my point is like, you know, if the leader of the opposition truly wanted to like hop on board and actually speak to the misery that we've been through over the past 3 years, there's something like this, the National Citizens Inquiry, that he could get behind. But of course, he's not going to do that. He is going to pretend to fight big pharma and not actually kind of go for the jugular, which is obviously these vaccines that we've had to deal with and everything that came along with that. Well, a lot of the misery was perpetrated by the government or the regime that I really believe that he's a part of. But yeah, and of course, the next story everyone's been talking about, we've all been talking about this, it's the election interference. Speaking of China, speaking of Beijing, speaking of fentanyl, it's the election interference happening in Canada. And I mean, there's so many clips of Pierre talking about this, but I'll just play this first one. It's, oh man. You know, what first came to mind when I saw this clip is, Pierre, are you in trouble too? Are you in trouble too, Pierre? Are you in the Conservative Party also in trouble? Because you sound really scared to answer these questions about election interference. Watch this.
How concerned are you by recent polls that show that many Conservative supporters believe the electoral system isn't fair or even? Angus Reid's findings suggested that some feel the election was even stolen. And why do you think that Conservative supporters are more concerned about this than others?
Well, I think Justin Trudeau has inspired a lot of suspicion by his refusal to, one, answer questions about his knowledge of Beijing's interference to help him in two successive elections. Leaked CSIS and PCO documents now show that Beijing worked to help elect.
You see how short of breath he is? Beijing helped. He's getting so much help from Beijing.
Justin Trudeau. That is an accepted fact. He doesn't even deny it. But he kept it hidden until courageous whistleblowers at CSIS released it for him. And now he refuses a public inquiry. I think Canadians of all political backgrounds are asking, what has Justin Trudeau got to hide? And furthermore, why hasn't he protected Chinese Canadians?
Yeah, he goes on a whole diatribe there about protecting Chinese Canadians. But again, you know, this Conservative Party, really, guys, I'm going to play a clip later where essentially, as we all know, that two of the MPs, if I'm not mistaken, two of the MPs who received money from this Chinese interference were Conservative MPs. They were Conservative MPs. And this is a nice fluff piece that was sent out by the Conservative Party. Trudeau continues his cover-up of Beijing's interference in Canadian democracy. Great. Are you going to come clean with your MPs who have received money from the Chinese government? You probably don't want to talk about that. Let's just talk about how, Trudeau is so awful, right? Trudeau is such an evil guy. He is. Why? Because he put us through all this COVID nonsense over the past 3 years. He's receiving foreign money from the Chinese. What is he up to? Well, Conservative Party, you've also put us through this COVID bullshit over the past 3 years. You didn't oppose any of that. And you've also received money from the Chinese government in this election interference. So how exactly? Oh, well, they got money to nine different MPs, and we only got money to 2 different MPs. That doesn't make me feel any better. That doesn't make me feel any better at all. This moral grandstanding when it comes to the Conservative Party over this, of like, yeah, you guys got more money from the Chinese than us. Therefore, you are more compromised than us. You're both compromised. You're both compromised. This is a problem. This is an issue. And as I kind of wrote in the description of this video, it's like the cowardice is everywhere. You cannot escape the cowardice. Okay. I kind of got into it with some people on Twitter the other day, basically saying, because they were kind of poo-pooing the PPC, which is, fair enough if you have criticism for the PPC. But I was making the point, at least the PPC is pushing the conversation in the right direction, because by just kind of poo-pooing the PPC and not criticizing Pierre Poilievre, not criticizing the cowardice of the Conservative Party that is becoming so abundantly obvious, it's becoming just as bad as Trudeau in certain categories, Slava Ukraine. The more you ignore this cowardice, the more you accept it, the more you let it proliferate across the country, not just at the federal level, but in the provincial levels. And we'll get to this later. We're going to talk about, pastors getting thrown in jail once again in Alberta, and Danielle Smith not really doing much about it. You can't escape the cowardice, guys. You can't escape the cowardice. Maybe you're working to buy land. Maybe you're working to kind of create your own commune out in the woods, the rural area. That might buy some time. That might buy a couple years. That might buy a few years. But if we don't address this cowardice that's within the Conservative Party and within this cowardice and this foreign influence and subversion of our politics, where do you think you're going to hide? How do you think it's just going to go away? Just going to click your heels together, build a log cabin, click your heels together, and then the cowardice and the subversion, the foreign subversion, is just going to go away? No, and on the contrary, it'll only get worse, and it'll only affect us down the road even more. And that's why I think it's important, or that's why I think it is stupid. I think it is unproductive to kind of just passively see all this egregious cowardice of the Conservative Party and just try to rationalize it. Try to say, you know what? Well, we just need to beat Trudeau. He's less paid off by the Chinese. He's blocking us down maybe a little bit less, or the cowardice already is everywhere, is my point. And here is a great example of that.
Doug Ford's Ontario Conservatives swept to power in 2018. A little-known candidate quietly made history.
I'm fortunate to have one of the best MPPs around in Ontario, Vincent, my friend.
Vincent Ke became the first immigrant from mainland China to be elected Ontario Conservative MPP.
The member for Don Valley North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
But intelligence sources say the MPP was also part of an alleged foreign interference network to advance Beijing's political agenda. During the 2019 federal election campaign, sources say the Chinese consulate transferred around $250,000 through a network. It involved at least 11 federal candidates, campaign staffers, and other politicians, both liberal and conservative, including Liberal MP Han Dong, who has denied the allegations. The funds were allegedly sent first through a businessman, Wei Cheng-yi. Then sources say the money flowed to a federal candidate's staff member and to Ke, who received about $50,000.
Okay, thank you.
The allegations stem from interviews with Canadian intelligence sources, including a senior official with detailed awareness of the CSIS investigations. Global News is not able to independently verify the allegations made by CSIS against Ke, Wei, or Dong.
This is false accusation. This is racist. I told them in the email already.
You say it's racist? Why is it
It's
racist?
racist because I was born in China, because I come from China.
So you never received $50,000 from the Toronto Consul?
Nothing.
That's racist, you guys. That's racist to accuse him of receiving money and influencing our elections here in Canada. This is unbelievable. And I think that one of the best sort of things to point to when you say, hey, we just got to get the libs out. We just got to get the libs out at the federal level. Just point to Doug Ford. Just point to Doug Ford and his Progressive Conservative Party and what they've done over the past 3 years during lockdowns. You know, Doug Ford, oh, look at these yahoos protesting. He was exactly like Trudeau in terms of how his attitude towards the pandemic and lockdowns and everything else. The only thing he did was, hey, I'm a conservative. I got buck a beer. Remember, I'm brothers with Rob Ford. Remember, when in reality, this guy is in lockstep with the Liberals. You know, I think we can all agree with that. And it's so it's very funny when these people think, hey, we're just going to support Pierre Poilievre and it's going to be totally different. You know, he's a real conservative, just like Doug Ford's a real conservative, right? Yeah. I don't think so. And yeah, Vincent Ke, a progressive conservative, allegedly was involved in pushing this money along in this election interference. You know, this is a huge deal. And you know, I don't want to like add to the anxiety or to you know, any conspiracies or anything, but it's like, this is what we know about. This is what we know about for sure. Well, sorry, not for sure, but this is what we've heard about. This is what has bubbled to the surface and maybe possibly been true. You know, what else could possibly be going on? And I think, you know, to speak to how underreported this gets and how little urgency this gets in Canada and how alarming that is, just look at this headline. This headline is baffling to me. This is from the National Post. Conservatives had sudden, unusual drop in votes in ridings of concern for Chinese interference. Is that really the most important thing right now? Oh yeah. Oh, this whole thing about Chinese interference. You know, our polling numbers aren't great. Really? Who cares about the poll? The polling numbers might be compromised at this point. You know, there's Chinese communists potentially interfering with our elections. Oh, well, it affected our poll numbers. Really? Really? That's the most important thing for the National Post to report on? Yeah, not so worried about, you know, our democracy being a total farce. Not so worried about, you know, Chinese communists completely interfering with our elections and potentially, you know, making a mockery of our entire democracy. No, our polling numbers went down. This really speaks to like how far gone so much of the Canadian establishment is in terms of honor, in terms of self-respect. As you know, on the show, we say it's okay to demand higher standards. That's all about self-respect and respecting yourself and actually like honoring the country and honoring all the things that make this country what it is. Yes, including democratic elections. And now we're seeing that it might be compromised on both sides by the Chinese communists. And I've mentioned this before. I think when I had Jeremy McKenzie on the show, you could create not just an entire episode, you could create an entire podcast all about the, you know, interference or the subversion of China in Canada. And speaking of which, there's somebody who's written an entire book about it, which is David Mulrooney. David Mulrooney is the former ambassador to China, and this is from 8 years ago, by the way. He says, calls for new rules on foreign ownership. Did anybody listen to him 8 years ago? I think they have done at least some changes to foreign home buyers here in Canada, thankfully. But for those who don't know, David Mulroney is Canada's former ambassador to China from 2009 to 2012. He's the author of a new book, Middle Power, Middle Kingdom, What Canadians Need to Know About China in the 21st Century. Sounds like David Mulroney was ringing the alarm bells there for us. Did anybody listen? Is anybody listening to him? You know, he was the former ambassador to China. He might know a thing or two about this. And he was tweeting, I guess this is earlier today, there is abundant evidence of Beijing's patient long-term effort to extend its reach into Canadian politics at all levels, seeking to groom and develop people of steadily increasing connectedness and influence. Here's how I put it at PROC last month. The party's objective is to transform Canada into a compliant country that perpetually looks over its shoulder to ensure that what it says and does meets Beijing's approval and looks the other way when Beijing's extraterritorial reach extends into our communities. Yeah, this again. Do we care about this? Do we like? We're on a leash. We're on a leash. We're on China's little leash, at their beck and call. You know. I made a joke recently where, yes, Canada is the second largest landmass, but the largest province of China. Who knows how deep this goes? I was getting sick to my stomach just researching this episode today. And quite frankly, like I haven't even, I'm sure that I've barely even scratched the surface. This is also from David Mulroney. China's Vancouver consulate interfered in 2022 municipal election, CSIS. PM ministers and senior officials have denied, stalled, played the racism card. Our democracy is now in a crisis that could have been avoided if they had simply told the truth. Well, that's not going to happen. I would love to know if the Conservative Party is going to talk about this. And again, like, they're probably not. They're probably not, because they have some of the blood on their hands. They have some of the guilt on their hands. They have Conservative MPs who allegedly have received funds from this Chinese interference. So, you know, hard to strongly condemn that and take the moral high ground when that's the case, you know. And again, like, you know, if the Conservative Party is not going to come clean, and why would they? Who is going to come clean about it? This is True North Center saying Liberals benefit from Chinese election interference, says Conservative MP. Well, of course the Conservative MP is going to say that. Is True North are you guys going to talk about the fact that Conservative MPs are receiving some of this funding as well? Yes, but it's not as much of the funding. It's not as much of the funding, you guys. Still a massive problem. You know, it's absolutely disheartening and like I said, humiliating. Like, where's the honor in this country anymore? And this is from the Junos. You guys have probably seen this clip. If you haven't, it's the Junos host saying something about election interference while closing the Junos.
What a night. Give it up for Nickelback, everybody. Congratulations to all the award winners, nominees, and performers. Sorry for the boobs. And thank you for joining us for Canada's most important night in music. And congratulations to you, Canada, you cutie. We're doing pretty okay as a country, you guys. We have probably minimal interference in our elections. We represented hard at the Oscars last night. Shout out to Everything Everywhere All at Once. We've got the best Olympic hockey team in the world.
Bro. Don't worry, guys. We got minimal interference in our elections. Our democracy is only kind of compromised. I mean, if this guy is like a pro-Chinese communist regime, he's probably laughing about this clip with him and his friends. He's saying, hey, yeah, you see how I just basically crapped all over them on live television at their musical award show? It's humiliating. It's absolutely humiliating. And again, you know, this Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, is not really interested, I don't think, in withholding that honor. It's all about withholding the regime that already exists, the regime that already benefits from the Chinese communists, because his party benefits from the Chinese communists. So it's really just all a song and dance to, hey, I'm holding these people accountable. I'm holding these people accountable. Okay. So back to that clip for a second. He says, oh, Canada, you're such a cutie. You're such a cutie, Canada. You know, Canada really is a cutie. if you are a dictator, if you are a world leader, Canada is a cutie. We have so much natural resources. And on top of that, we have a very naive populace who's very easily molded by the propaganda that exists here. So yes, we are ripe for the taking advantage of. And I think that's why Canada really, if we knew all the facts, I think you would see it is a total gangbang of global special interests, foreign subversion. This is only just one thread on how completely compromised this country is. And that is, Chinese communist interference, and how I bet if you talk to business leaders in different sectors, a lot of them would have a similar story of like, yeah, well, we sold out to the Chinese. Yeah, well, we sold out our resources. We sold out our business to Chinese interests. And it actually reminds me of something that somebody told me this the other day, and they're kind of a friend of mine, but like what they said disgusted me. They said, like speaking to like the content I make, they said, well, Greg, you should just kind of like ride this out and try to make as much money as you can. And I thought, I was like silent, and they're like, what? And it's like, that is the exact fucking attitude that's ruined this country. That is the exact attitude that has fucking ruined this country. Part of my language, but it's like, hey, well, yeah, I guess I'll just ride this Chinese communist money thing and just kind of ride it out. I'll just kind of try to make as much money as I can over this, all these Chinese businessmen trying to sell us out. Hey, I guess I'll just sell out part of our country and just make some money. There are more important things than making some money. Like it's, man, it really upsets me. But anyway, going back to the dog and pony show of how we're going to hold this interference accountable. Of course, Justin Trudeau announced David Johnston to be the guy who is going to, investigate this Chinese interference. There's a lot to go over. Maybe you've seen it already, but essentially he is a member of the Trudeau Foundation. But this clip paints an even better picture. David Johnston is a lovely man who is hopelessly in conflict of interest. He has deep ties to 3 generations of the Trudeau family, allowing for no real objectivity. Check out this clip.
A lot of Canadians don't realize that you, in fact, were a very good friend of Pierre Elliott Trudeau, and that your family, you knew all the Trudeau kids when they were growing up.
His 3 boys were the same age as our 5 daughters, so we were kind of a ski party from time to time at Mont Tremblant, where we have a place and would ski on weekends. So we got to know the children, and our friendship, our relationship was really built out of childhood exchanges.
A lot of Canadians don't realize that.
That's great, isn't it? Isn't that great? Isn't that great? They're so tight knit. They're so tight knit. Such a tight knit crew. And here's the thing, folks. The Mr. Poilievre is coming out against this and saying, "Oh, it's conflict of interest." This guy was appointed by none other than Stephen Harper. He was appointed by Stephen Harper. He's great family friends with Trudeau, David Johnston, and our conservative savior, Stephen Harper, chooses academic David Johnston as the Governor General. So, yeah, I mean, it's back to my original point. It seems as though that both the Conservatives and the Liberals are at least working together, or at least compromised in the same sort of way. The jig's up, guys. The jig's up. It's over. Let's start rebuilding, starting from scratch. I don't know, but simply trusting this Conservative Party is not a good plan. Okay, simply trusting this Conservative Party is not a good plan whatsoever. And I believe this came out today. Yeah. Trudeau's pick of former Governor General Johnston as interference rapporteur under fire from opposition. Let's see what Pierre Poilievre had to say, shall we? Pierre Poilievre says, Justin Trudeau has named a family friend, old neighbor from the cottage, and member of the Beijing-funded Trudeau Foundation to be the independent rapporteur on Beijing's interference. Get real, said Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre in a Thursday statement. Trudeau must end his cover-up. Call a public inquiry now. Call the auditors. Call a public inquiry now. You know why this really upsets me? Can anybody guess why this really upsets me? Pierre Poilievre calling a public inquiry? Well, there's a trucker convoy last year, and the Trudeau regime or the Canadian regime, maybe it was the Chinese regime, I don't really know who made the decision on this, but they decided to call the Emergencies Act to crush a peaceful protest. And you know what happened after that? There was a public inquiry after that. Great, let's do a public inquiry. Let's see if justice still exists in this country. And as we saw, as it unfolded, turns out justice does not exist in this country. Turns out, if you are the leader, you're the prime minister, you can lie under oath. Turns out you can lie under oath in Canada. Wow. That's what we learned from the public inquiry. And of course, the Rouleau Commission, with their conclusion of this Emergencies Act inquiry, yeah, it's okay to crush a peaceful protest if we don't like it. You know, you're allowed to do that in Canada now. And what did Pierre Poilievre do? He rubber stamped. He went, approved. I approve of this authoritarian behavior. Approved. Thanks, Pierre. Great. Yeah, let's call another inquiry. Because that one went so fucking well, didn't it? Yeah. Fantastic. And you know, I'm probably a broken record at this point, but why the heck didn't Pierre Poilievre challenge that inquiry, by the way? Because of his strategy, bro. I'm going to, you know, exploit the momentum and energy of the trucker convoy. I'm going to exploit this energy of, you know, anti-lockdowns, anti-vaccine mandates. I'm going to exploit that to become the leader of the Conservative Party. And then, well, actually, I'm going to justify everything that happened to them, though. Yeah, fuck those people. Yeah, they got crushed with police horses. Yeah, they know they deserve that. Yeah, Emergencies Act, throwing them in jail. Yeah, check. I'm totally fine with all of that. I got those suckers support before lunch. Isn't that amazing? It's absolutely disgusting. And again, for people who are like, well, we got to get the libs out. What you are putting up with disgusting behavior. This disgusting behavior, by not speaking up about it, you are allowing it. And you are allowing this disgusting behavior to proliferate. And, you know, it's about boundaries. I feel like so much we're talking about almost like relationships on this show. It's like, if you don't set boundaries with people, if those people violate your boundaries, they're going to continue to violate your boundaries. We need to let this Conservative Party know what our boundaries are. If they're violating our boundaries, let them know. What do you gain by letting them violate your boundaries? You let them know you can violate my boundaries anytime. That's what you let them know. And they're going to continue to do that. They're definitely going to continue to do that. And it's very similar how, you know, liberal voters put up with the blackface. Well, now these conservative voters are putting up with cowards and liars and people who, you know, create all of this misdirection. And it's really bad. It's really, really bad because the pattern is very, very clear. You know, Pierre Poilievre is going to say, hey, I'm going to fight Big Pharma. But you're not actually going to fight Big Pharma on like the elephant in the room, which is, you know, COVID-19 vaccines. And then he says, hey, I'm actually going to, you know, stand up for the trucker convoy. That's what he said initially. And then after the fact, he's like, you know what? The trucker convoy actually wasn't about vaccine mandates. It was actually about the cost of living, you know, and on and on. This continues to happen. Where he says one thing, but he's really just kind of misdirecting everybody in a different direction, and it's not strategy. I actually think it's nefarious. I actually think it truly is the kind of like left right back and forth, step back and forth. Someone in chat just said, "What do you think of Chris Sky running for mayor?" Go watch the last episode of Controlled Opposition. I interviewed Chris Sky on episode 9, so go on and check that out. But let's see here. Yeah, public inquiry. Pierre Poilievre think we can call a public inquiry. I don't think so. I think I really don't know what else there is to say, guys. This Chinese election interference should be a much, much bigger deal. And again, I think we now know why Pierre Poilievre didn't come out to say, hey, this is treason, Trudeau. Hey, you know, this is a threat to our democracy. He didn't come out with any of those strong words, probably because he's part of the problem. Probably because Pierre Poilievre is part of the problem. He is not interested in, calling out this for what it is, which is a subversion of our nation. It is a huge violation of what should exist in a free country. If this happened, can you imagine if a story like this hit America, that there is evidence, or at least there's alleged evidence of money from China going to candidates in the U.S., everyone would be losing their minds. It would be total insanity. And here it's kind of like okay, we're going to look into it and blah, blah, blah. And I just feel like I'm taking crazy pills because nobody wants to address the fact, no conservatives especially, want to address the fact that they have benefited from this Chinese election interference. So that's going to do it on the show here. Oh, we got a super chat from Convert313. Don't like donating half of this to the grubs at YouTube. Entropy streams good, Greg. Full speed. Mergerb. That's absolutely right, guys. That's absolutely right. There is a lot of crazy stuff happening in Europe right now that I would like to cover at some point. But for now, I think that's going to be it on the topic. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. If you want to support me, you can go to gregwycliffe.com. There's donation links there. If you want to watch previous episodes of Controlled Opposition, there is a playlist on my YouTube channel. You can also become a member on YouTube and on Facebook. Thank you so much for watching. And if you have comments of topics that you'd like me to cover on the show, then definitely leave it below. Other than that, it is okay to demand higher standards. We'll talk to you soon, guys.